Uh, we're going to do the pledge now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber for the 68th day of the 106th Legislature first session. Our chaplain for today is Pastor Carl Saratsky of the Tabor Lutheran Church in Wausau, Nebraska, Senator Graygart's district. Please rise.
Living and eternal God, provider of all goodness and mercy, we pray that you touch the hearts and minds of all who are gathered here today. We thank you for your presence so that we may best work together in serving you and the people of Nebraska. Strengthen us for the tasks that you have called us to fulfill and to remain faithful and diligent in the responsibilities that we have been given for the common good of all citizens. We pray that we continue to learn and help one another to respect, work, and care for all people so that our state and our nation may grow in preserving and promoting the dignity of humankind. We also pray that we be given a vision for those that we represent that will bless them, nurture them, and secure justice for one and all. All glory and honor is yours, gracious God. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Saratsky. I call to order the 68th day of 106th Legislature first session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
I have a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections for the journal?
Mr. President, on page 1235, line 11, insert due to a high rate of unemployment combined with a high poverty rate. That's the only correction I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
I have one item, Mr. President. The Judiciary Committee chaired by Senator Lathrop reports Legislative Bill 519 to general file with committee amendments attached. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members, Senator Coltman would like to recognize Dr. Tricia Sams of Utica, Nebraska, who's serving as today's family physician of the day. Dr. Sams is with us on the north balcony. Please rise, doctors. We can thank you for being here. Welcome to the Nebraska Legislature. Also, Senator Breezy has two very special guests today. We have Senator Breezy's brother, Tim, and Tim's wife, Teresa, from Colorado Springs, Colorado. They're with us on the north balcony. Could Tim and Teresa Breezy please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. We'll now proceed to the agenda. Select file appropriations bills. LB 641A. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, with respect to 641A, Senator Salama, I have no amendments to the bill.
Senator Salama for motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 641A be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion to advance LB 641A to ENR for engrossing. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 641A advances. Proceeding to general file 2019 Senate priority bills. Mr. Clerk, LB.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 149 is a bill offered by Senator Quick. It's a bill for an equity of vapor products. It changes and provides restrictions relating to the sale and use of vapor products and flavored liquids. It defines and redefines terms. It requires sellers of vapor products to be licensed as prescribed. It changes legislative findings. It adds restrictions relating to vapor products in the Nebraska Clean Indoor Air Act. Introduced on January 11, referred to the General Affairs Committee, advanced to general file. I do have committee amendments as well as other amendments pending, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Quick, you're recognized to open LB 149.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I'm introducing LB 149, which is my personal priority bill. I've talked to many of you about this bill because it's really important to my community and my district, and it will have a positive impact on all of our communities. This bill had its beginnings last May when I met with a Grand Island School Board member who asked me to meet to discuss about children vaping in our public schools and how we could address that. We had several meetings over the summer working on a bill that would meet our goals. The number one item was to raise the age for purchase and reduce the exposure and use of vaping products by our children. When we began researching this, we found that this isn't just happening in Grand Island, but it's happening in communities all across our state and throughout the United States. This is an issue we as state legislators need to address for the health, safety, and well-being of our children. First and foremost, we need to make it clear that nicotine is harmful for developing brains. It triggers parts of the brain associated with addiction and makes it more likely to succumb to addiction or to more dangerous drugs in the future. Researchers agree that nicotine is harmful for developing brains, and most e-cigarettes contain nicotine, especially those most popular among youth. Late last year, the United States Surgeon General released a report stating that in 2018, more than 3.6 million youth in the U.S. used e-cigarettes. 1 in 5 high school students and 1 in 20 middle school students are using e-cigarettes. These numbers led the Surgeon General to declare e-cigarettes use among youth as an epidemic in the United States. The Surgeon General also reported that most e-cigarettes contain nicotine, and nicotine exposure during adolescence can impact learning, memory, attention, and can increase the risk for addiction to other drugs in the future. Nicotine exposure is harmful to the still developing human brain, and brains continue to develop until the age around 25. LB 149 is designed to address a problem our families and educators are grappling with. Children in our schools are becoming addicted to nicotine because of e-cigarette devices. While some adults who are trying to quit smoking use certain vapor devices to reduce their amount of nicotine over time, Youth who use these products have generally not started smoking yet. Their first exposure to nicotine is through e-cigarettes, not traditional cigarettes. They often don't know that they contain nicotine, but because these devices are easier to use and hide than traditional cigarettes, they are consuming far more nicotine than if they were smoking traditional cigarettes. The U.S. Surgeon General recently declared youth vaping an epidemic and recommends increasing the age and adding products to indoor smoking bans. LB 149 follows these recommendations to help solve this epidemic in our communities. LB 149 is amended and brought to the General Affairs Committee does 4 simple but important things to address the issue of our children's addiction to nicotine. First, LB 149 defines vapor products and e-cigarette products as electronic nicotine delivery systems. This is important language that was suggested by the Attorney General's office. This language allows our Attorney General to enforce our laws by including it in licensure. This also will allow us to capture future technologies and development in our definitions, instead of having to come back and update definitions. This definition also ensures that we close potential loopholes and continue to receive funding for the Master Settlement Agreement, which goes into our Health Care Cash Fund, which funds many of our important programs in our state. Second, LB 149 requires that those who sell e-cigarette products or ENDS devices are licensed in the same way that tobacco retailers are. This ensures we can enforce our laws and hold retailers accountable. It is incredibly important to have this measure in place to make it easier to track stores that don't comply with regulations in place to prevent underage access to these products. Third, LB 149 adds these electronic nicotine delivery systems to our Clean Indoor Air Act, so they cannot be used in workplaces or other areas. The Surgeon General has called for indoor vape-free policies, and adding vapor products to Nebraska's Clean Indoor Air Act is a logical step to combating underage vaping and e-cigarette use. The CDC has said that e-cigarette aerosol is not harmless water vapor and is not safe as clean air. If it contains nicotine and can contain formaldehyde and other hard metals and cancer-causing agents. Allowing e-cigarettes in workplaces and other public places undermines the success of smoke-free laws by creating an environment that encourages smoking. We have to update our laws to reflect current forms of smoking. Adding vapor products to the Clean Indoor Air Act is another way we can discourage children and young people from taking up vaping. Finally, but importantly, LB 149 would increase the age for all tobacco and e-cigarette products in order to keep them out of the reach of school-age children. High school principals from Omaha Bryan, Burke, and Grand Island Central Catholic testified at our committee hearing what we've heard from around the country. 18-year-olds in high school or just out of high school will purchase these devices and sell them or give them to young children. Increasing the age will reduce the number of people who will start smoking and will literally save lives. It is important to treat traditional cigarettes and tobacco products and e-cigarettes the same. Kids who start vaping often transition to traditional cigarettes, putting them at risk for even more health issues. Most people who start smoking do so before the age of 18. I want to make it clear that this bill does not target adults who choose to use vapor products in order to quit smoking. The goal of this bill is to prevent youth from starting to smoke or vape. The risk for underage youth with developing brains is too great to ignore. By regulating e-cigarettes and by raising the age limit for both e-cigarette products and tobacco products, we hope to curb the availability of these devices to youth and reduce their appeal. I also just want to take a minute to thank all the stakeholders on this bill, and I'm proud of all of the important changes we were able to incorporate. With that, I would appreciate your support for LB 149 so we can address this public health crisis in our communities. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Quick. As the clerk indicated, there are amendments from the General Affairs Committee. Senator Breezy, as chair of that committee, you're welcome to open the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I rise to introduce AM 901, the committee amendment to LB 149. LB 149 was heard before the committee on March 4th, LB 149 would make changes to tobacco, nicotine, and vapor products laws and increase the legal age for use of such products. AM 901 was adopted to address some of the concerns brought about at the hearing from individuals, including the Attorney General's office, and to find a compromise while staying true to the intent of the bill, which was to help reduce teen nicotine and vape use, especially in schools. AM 901 makes changes to the original language and accomplishes the following. It replaces vapor products language with electronic nicotine delivery language. It raises the legal age to smoke or use cigarettes, cigars, electronic nicotine delivery systems, alternative nicotine products, or tobacco in any form to 19 years of age. And I would note that there wasn't enough support in the committee to move it to general file with the green copy at 21 years of age, and so I told Senator Quick that, and we essentially got his okay to move it out of committee at 19. Section 2 of the amendment changes the definition of cigarette to match the escrow and MSA definitions of cigarette for consistency purposes. Cigarette is defined as any product that contains nicotine, is intended to be burned or heated under ordinary conditions of use, and consists of or contains any roll of tobacco wrapped in paper or in any substance not containing tobacco. Tobacco in any form that is functional in the product, which, because of its appearance, the type of tobacco used in the filter, or its packaging and labeling, is likely to be offered to or purchased by consumers as a cigarette. Any roll of tobacco wrapped in any substance containing tobacco, which, because of its appearance, the type of tobacco used in the filter, or its packaging and labeling, is likely to be offered to or purchased by consumers as a cigarette. Section 2 also defines electronic nicotine delivery system. Those systems are defined as any product or device containing nicotine, tobacco, or tobacco derivatives that employ a heating element, power source, electronic circuit, or other electrical, chemical, or mechanical means, regardless of shape or size, to simulate smoking by delivering nicotine, tobacco, or tobacco derivatives in vapor, fog, mist, gas, or aerosol to a person inhaling from the product or device. The amendment further details what electronic nicotine delivery systems include. Electronic nicotine delivery system language is added to ensure that all intended products are covered by LB 149 and to anticipate soon-to-arrive products to the market and avoid any inconsistencies or issues with Nebraska's requirements under the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement. And I note that the FDA and several other states have incorporated the same definition of electronic nicotine delivery systems. Sections 3 through 9, 11, 12, and 16 make the following adjustments throughout the bill necessary to update and harmonize the provisions by removing vapor products language, inputting electronic nicotine delivery systems language, increasing the legal age for use of such products to 19 years of age. Section 10 updates the legislative intent provision, providing that the legislature finds incumbent health risks associated with using tobacco products by replacing smoking products language with using tobacco products language, and replaces the term minors with the term young people in reference to the legislative finding that the growing number of young people who start using tobacco products is staggering, and even more abhorrent are the ages at which such use begins. Section 13 adds Section 15 of the Act to the Nebraska Clean Indoor Air Act. Section 14 includes in the definitions section for the Clean Indoor Air Act the definitions found in Section 15 of this Act. Section 15 specifies that electronic nicotine delivery system has the same meaning as in Section 28-141801. This provides for an operative date of January 1st, 2020. Again, this bill was brought to help address and combat the issue of teen and underage use of tobacco, nicotine, and vapor products, especially in our schools. The committee amendment AM 901 seeks to accomplish this while addressing concerns brought about during the hearing and discussions, including those of the Attorney General's office. AM 901 acts as a white copy amendment and would replace the entire bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Breezy. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Friesen would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 1478.
Senator Friesen, you recognize to open on AM 1478.
Thank you, Mr. President. AM 1478 is a very simple amendment. It amends the committee amendment to change the age for using tobacco and vaping products from 19 years of age to 21 years of age. This was brought to me by a school in my legislative district in an effort to keep tobacco and vaping products out of schools, since some schools have students in attendance that are 19 years old and older. And I encourage you to support AM 1478. And as we look at the age of young people, and we've had many discussions in this body about when is it appropriate to either hold public office or some of the other things. And young people's minds are easily moldable at that age yet. And I think this is just a very simple step that maybe gives them a couple more years to mature and decide whether or not they want to smoke. And when you look at the industry and what they've done in the past, it is still a very addictive product. You know, when we were in my age, when I was in college, it was a cool thing to sit out in the hallway and smoke whenever there was a break. And you did it because there was nothing else to do and you were watching the peer pressure. But when you look back, some of us were able to quit and some were not. And some of the health issues that they experienced were not worth it. This is a product that everyone knows is not good for you. It is addictive, and I just don't see that the risk is worth the buzz at the time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Debate is now open on LB 149, the committee amendment, and the amendment to the committee amendment. Senator Blood.
Thank you, Mr. President. As of now, I rise in opposition to both the amendments and the bill. I have spoke to Senator Quick about this, and I'm probably going to have a few questions for him. I think we can do better than how this bill ended. We have some issues, or I have some issues in how the bill is written. Senator Quick, I would ask that he yield to some questions.
Senator Quick, would you yield, please?
Yes.
Senator Quick, how old do you have to be drafted into the military?
Well, I don't, do they still have the draft? So 18?
18, okay. I'm going to ask you some questions because I want to get some of this on record. So one of the concerns I have is that the way that it's written, the Indoor Clean Air Act, is very narrowly defined, and I think it still leaves the door open to vaping with things like caffeine and other foreign substances, such as natural testosterone or marijuana. But then when you add the electronic delivery nicotine system, it really makes it more narrow. What would be your response to that?
Well, in my opinion, I think that when you define the device that you can use to vape these products in, that it's a nicotine delivery system, but all those products would use that same system. So I think by having that in there, children aren't going to be able to buy those products until the age of 21 if we can pass that language.
And then how do you see enforcement on this? How would you enforce this?
Well, it would be the same as what it is for tobacco right now. It would fall under that.
So, well, is it the same? How do you test for nicotine?
What's that?
How would you test for nicotine? Because you're putting the responsibility on the municipalities on this. So with a cigarette, right, you can visually see what it is. But with these delivery systems, how will law enforcement know that it's nicotine?
Well, I think all these children that are vaping anything will have to be, they can't possess that device for one thing. So
Okay.
they shouldn't be in possession of any of those devices.
So one of the questions that I have is, I noticed that South Carolina did a law where if you're 18 and under, that you can't go into a vape shop without an adult. Was there a reason that we didn't try and gear more towards things that were more enforceable as opposed to what we have? And I want to say that I support what you're trying to do. I just think we need to find a better way of doing it. So I'm certainly not here to tell you that I think what you're doing is wrong.
So that was was that a question?
That
or?
was a question. So why
Okay.
didn't we
So
go for something more like that?
Because that wasn't one of the things that come up over the summer that we talked about. When we met with the school board members and the school administration, we were just trying to address, we talked about anything from banning flavors to raising the age. We wanted to go for 21. I mean, that's one of the things that the school district wanted, to try to get that age separation. But that wasn't one of the things that we discussed, and probably because it was just us talking.
So can you tell me, Senator Quick, how many of the public health industry organizations that we have in Nebraska came to the table on this and helped craft this bill?
Well, we had the Cancer Society that we talked to later in the process because, like I say, over the summer it was just basically me and the school board members and the school administration. But then later on, we talked to the Attorney General, we talked to the Cancer Society, we actually even talked to tobacco, and Joel come to visit my office as well after I introduced the bill. So one of the things that when we met with the Attorney General, most of his language is probably what they're opposed to, is what I'm guessing.
And so you brought up one of the other issues that I have is that I've been researching the heck out of this because
1 minute.
I agree there's something we can do, but my research has shown that the industry, the tobacco industry, truly wants us to focus only on the nicotine. And I kind of feel like they're doing a gotcha where they've got all these states focusing on the nicotine part of it, and then because of that, we're not addressing the other issues that are involved. So I appreciate your time. I may have more questions for you later, Senator Quick. And again, my hope is that we can just get a better bill. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood and Senator Quick. Senator Quick, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the General Affairs Committee and Senator Breezy for their work on this bill, and I also want to thank Senator Friesen for bringing the amendment to take it back to 21. As I had stated, one of the things that we really worked on that we wanted to do was get that age separation. It was really important for us when we met over the summer. Really what we were working on was kids getting addicted to nicotine in our school systems, because that seems to be the biggest problem that we're facing right now. Now, I do realize that kids can smoke other things in those products, but I think some of that is addressed with the fact that the nicotine delivery system is the same system that these kids would use to vape other products. So if they can't buy that vaping device, I think that addresses a lot of the concerns by maybe from some of the opposition to this bill. I think what we've found is that those children that are using those devices are using it mainly right now in the school system to get that buzz off of the nicotine. They see it as a way that it's cool, other kids are doing it. And then there's also the flavors. And so it doesn't taste as bad. They can actually hide it from the teacher by using the Juul device. And then they pass it off to other kids. I mean, it's like the Attorney General said, it's an epidemic across our country. I know there are other states that are actually looking to move the age limit to 21 and have already done that. I think the United States, on the federal side, they're looking at also moving it to 21. So I just wanted to thank Senator Friesen for bringing that amendment, and I will be back on the mic to talk about some other issues. The importance, well, I guess I can talk about it right now. The importance of moving the age to 21. The majority of smokers begin smoking before the age of 18. And I think that's something that's been proven over time. I think when tobacco first, when they wanted to regulate tobacco, that was one of the things they did make it 18. But what we're seeing now is that these 18-year-old kids with the vaping products are actually able to purchase the product and sell it to the younger kids. So the vaping has become more of an epidemic than even the tobacco products at that time. Raising the minimum age of a legal purchase will prevent young adults from beginning to use tobacco products. The impact of raising the minimum age of 21 is substantially higher than raising it to 19. That is, more young adults will have access to these products if age were raised to 21 rather than if it were raised simply to 19. I know Senator Blood also brought up the fact that if you're 18 and you can serve in the military, that you should be able to maybe use tobacco products or vaping products. I think the issue that we're facing is not people in the military, it's our children, younger children. These are children in middle school, in high school. I've even talked to a grade school teacher in Grand Island who said that grade school kids are even starting to vape now. And I think one of the biggest problems too with this is that there's not enough education out there for some of these, for kids and for adults to understand that there's more than just nicotine in some of these products. There are some other chemicals in there, and when I come back and speak the next time, I'll talk about some of those chemicals that are in these products. And with that, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Quick. Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I support the bill. I support the amendment. I think it's a very good move that is being taken. This, in my opinion, is a public safety issue. Young people are a part of the public, and this is not really one of those in loco parentis types of matters where the state stands in place of the parent. There has been evidence gathered to show the harm that is done to a given category of young people. So I think the regulation in this way is feasible, legal, and very wise. I have to ask, if I may, and if he'll respond, a question to Senator Breezy.
Senator Breezy, yield, please.
Yes.
First of all, Senator Breezy, I didn't realize that your memory was so good. I heard your presentation. How did you remember all of that?
I jot down notes, and I utilize my notes to do that.
But you remember to look at your notes.
Sure.
Then I still stick by that. You have a very good memory.
Thank you.
Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, there is a few concerns with this bill, obviously, and one of the concerns brought up by AM 1478 is the age. But I believe the objective, I thought all along the objective of this bill was to help schools keep vaping products out of their buildings and thereby reduce the use of these products by young folks. You know, I'm generally of the opinion that we should not take it upon ourselves to try to curtail behavior that we think is unwise or unhealthy to the extent it only impacts the user or the individuals that undertake that behavior. And I think that was the sentiment of our committee, and that's why there weren't the votes to get this out as presented in the green copy at 21. Instead, we dropped it to 19, had the votes. You know, there aren't many 19-year-olds in our school systems, and I think that limiting the use of these products to those age 19 and over really narrowly tailors this bill to accomplish the bill's objective without overreach. And I would suggest that's why the committee voted it out at 19. You know, if we're going to talk about trying to curtail smoking, heck, we had a testifier suggest that, well, he spoke of the limbic system responsible for the, he said, rewards of risk-taking behavior. I didn't understand it completely, but his point was that the closer we get to 24 and 25 years old, the more apt we're able to really curtail behavior. And I don't know about you, but I'm not going to raise this thing to 24, 25 years old. Instead, I think it's really incumbent on us to tailor things like this fairly closely to what is the real objective. And that's keeping it out of our schools. And although I can't speak for the rest of the committee, I believe that's why we went with 19 instead of 21. Personally, I'm still kind of up in the air on this whole thing, and I'm interested in listening to the debate going forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Senator Wayne.
Thank you, colleagues. I do sit on general affairs, and what I just want to mention is process matters. We are built in this body off of the more trust we build with each other, the better we can get things done. And what concerns me and why I rose on this amendment instead of the amendment after this, which is mine, is because I heard Senator Quick thank the committee and also thank Senator Friesen. The issue with that is, if I make an agreement with the chairman, if I make an agreement with members on the committee, which I will talk more about if we get to my amendment, then any bill or amendment that comes to the floor that isn't a part of that agreement has got to be hostile. You have to stand up and say, this is a hostile amendment. Although I may like 21, I made an agreement to get this out of committee with those on the committee at 19. If that's the case, colleagues, we are going to have multiple agreements being made in multiple committees and another senator introducing an amendment to take it right back to the original bill, circumventing our entire committee process. And if we're going to walk down that path, we are walking down a very deadly point in this body where we can never trust our committees again. Because what's the point of having a committee come to an agreement and work with the introducer of the bill to kick it out at a certain age than to have another amendment on the floor and the bill introducer not treat that as hostile? That's a problem for me. I sit on the floor, and my good friend Senator Groney and I have spent 2 days yelling at each other over what I perceive was misrepresentation. I can't do that for 2 days and then stand here and be silent on this. When we're going around the committee process and going around the chairman who spent time negotiating this deal to, one, get out of committee, and I think that what my amendment further reflects what the bill introducer also agreed to, at least 3, if not 4 members on the committee, that we would remove it from the Clean Door Air Act. And we'll talk about that when we get to my committee. But I just think for the sanctity of the body, although any amendment in any bill can be amended on the floor at any given time and it's a straight up and down vote, I agree with that. At any point, I remember reading historically where Senator Chambers, they were talking about trash and disposable waste, amended it to include the Omaha not have any payment for trash. So I get that. But I also will say there wasn't probably an agreement not to do that. What I'm saying is we can amend anytime we want on the floor, and that's your right. But as a bill introducer, if you have an agreement with certain people on this body, particularly the chairman of the committee in which that came out of, I think we need to be careful when the chairman doesn't know or sees another amendment that disagrees with what the committee put out. It'll still be a straight up and down vote, but I do just want to mention that on the record. This came out a certain way because there was agreement between the introducer and many members on the committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Senator Blood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, I still stand against both the amendments and the bill, and it is not because I don't care about our children, but again, there's specific issues that are sticking in my craw. And so I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that isn't addressed. One of the things that isn't addressed is how these products are marketed to the children. I helped a family member move to Omaha about 2 weeks ago, and I was in their kitchen, and there was a small box, and it talked about, I think it was a cheesecake. And there was a picture of somebody in a kitchen, and I looked around for ingredients. I thought maybe it was some sort of essential oil to make cheesecake with, some kind of flavoring like vanilla. And no matter what I did, there was nothing on the outside of that box that told me that it was vaping juice. And I find that concerning. And I'm wondering if that's something that we also need to address, is that, who are we marketing to? You go back to the years of Joe Camel, who was obviously the marketing company trying to get to our youth, and it worked. So I do support what Senator Quick's mission is with this bill, but what I don't support is the wonky way that it's written. And it would be my hope that if indeed Senator Quick's bill does pass through general, that he meets one-on-one with all of our health institutions, all of our health providers here in Nebraska, because I think they too have issues with how the bill is written. We're all smart individuals, that's why we're here on the floor. And you can do research for 2 to 3 minutes and find that this is a ploy by the tobacco companies. They're coming into states and going, we absolutely support age 21, and we support you putting additional regulation on vaping products. But they're narrowing it just down to the nicotine. So I refuse to give in to the big industry and be told that I need to look in this lane when the lane is much bigger. And I encourage you guys to do your research as well. We've had this feel-good bill. We have somewhere where we want to go, which is to protect our children, and those are very good things. But don't you think it's unusual that tobacco's coming in such full support on these bills? Is it really for just cause like that they support this because they want to protect our youth? Or are they trying to get us to look the other direction while they do something bigger and better that makes them a lot of money? Think about that. We can do better. You can still be in favor of the children and want change in this bill. Right, Senator Lowe? Is this one time we're in favor of the children, all right? And I think that we're not being good, I know that we're not being good policymakers if we can't come to terms and make this a better bill. So I think sometimes we're in such a hurry to push the good cause through that we forget that the policy has to be written better. And so now we have Senator Wayne's amendment, we have Senator Friesen's amendment, we have the General Affairs amendment. And by the way, I sit on that committee, and it was really hard for me because, again, at that time I thought the bill was kind of wonky. Let's just do better. If indeed Senator Quick has the votes to move this through, we've got to make this a better bill. Or when it does come on select, unfortunately, my friend, I will filibuster it or extend the debate or however you want to put it, because I think we can't push this policy through until we correct it. With that, I would give any time I might have left to Senator Quick.
Thanks, Senator Blood. Senator Quick, you've been yielded 1 minute.
Okay, thank you, Senator Blood. I'll just take a minute just to address Senator Wayne's comments. So he was talking about circumventing the process, and I don't mean to call anybody out, but we've had issues where we pulled bills from committees, and senators have voted. So we more or less circumvented the committee process and pulled bills from committee to be heard on the floor. And so I would say that it's not a fair statement for him to make the comment that the comments that he did. My original bill was for 21. I did talk to Senator Breezy. There were some issues with trying to get it out at 21. I thought I had the votes, so I did talk to him and said, then can we vote at 19 to bring it out? But I think Senator Breezy always understood that in my heart, I really wanted to get that age to 21 to get that age.
Senator, but you're next in the queue. You may continue.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. So now that I'm done talking about that, some of the things that I want to make sure that I get out there is the fact that we worked with the Attorney General on the language. And I think that's some of the objection to the bill from what I'm hearing, is that it doesn't define enough products. Well, the problem with, you cannot define every product under the sun. So we went for the nicotine delivery system, which is mainly the vaping device and any products that would contain nicotine. Now, if an underage or if a child goes in to purchase and we have the age at 21, they're not going to be able to buy the vaping device itself, and that's what they can use any of these products in. So if they can't purchase a device, then they're not going to be able to vape any other products. So I think it covers most of the concerns that maybe Senator Blood would have. Now, as far as my whole process has been that we get this to 21 to get it out of the hands, to get that age separation, to address the concerns we're having in our schools. There are so many kids that are using these products, and I think I addressed that earlier, that for whatever reason, whether they think it's cool or they think it's they get that little hit off of the nicotine. I talked to one. Their grandparents in Grand Island, and their granddaughter came to him and talked about the fact that their granddaughter came to him and told him that she knew of some of her classmates that were going through 3 Juul pods a day. That's the equivalent of 3 packs of cigarettes. That's a lot of nicotine. I also talked to another individual who coaches volleyball. She said that they had one of their players who was addicted to nicotine, and she can't get off the nicotine. That shouldn't happen when you're in high school. And it's all because they think vaping is harmless. They think that anything that they get from vaping is harmless. One of the things I want to talk about is that the CDC has stated that e-cigarette aerosol is not harmless water vapor and is not as safe as clean air. It contains nicotine and contains formaldehyde and metals like nickel and lead, ultrafine particles that can damage lungs and other cancer-causing agents like acrolein. The United States Surgeon General called on states and localities to include e-cigarettes in smoke-free policies in order to protect the public from both secondhand smoke and secondhand aerosol. So these products do contain many other chemicals besides nicotine, and I understand Senator Blood's concerns with some of the other things that they can vape in these devices. But I think this bill should cover those concerns by saying that they can't purchase the device itself. And, like I say, I've worked on this bill since last May, working with the school board members, I go to some of the tobacco-free meetings in Grand Island and talk to them about some of these devices. And they've all been supportive of LB 149. They all understand that we need to address this issue. And I think should be put upon this legislature to make that decision to add this, not only vaping products, but tobacco products that would take this to 21. And I think this bill with the General Affairs Committee would address those issues. I think Senator Friesen addresses my concern with making sure we get that age separation. It actually benefits the retailers for the age separation because the driver's license has changed from a vertical driver's license to a horizontal. When you're classified as an adult, you get that, I guess it would be for alcohol purchases, it would just change that driver's license. So you could it would make it easier for retailers. They wouldn't have to be checking dates on the driver's licenses. With that, thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Quick. Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I was probably the surprise yes vote to get this out of committee. That's because we agreed to take it down to 19 from 21. By moving it up to 21, I would be a no vote on this. I really questioned my thought on this bill because I don't agree with kids doing things like smoking or drinking when they're in high school. But they do that. They're all looking for something to do, maybe that might be a little bit wrong. So I'm really questioning myself on whether or not to vote for or against this bill. Because I think I'd rather have them smoking something like the vapor or inhaling that has a very low content of nicotine than have them drinking or something that might be much worse. I don't agree with the Juul that has a very high content of nicotine in it, but we're not addressing that at this moment. When I look at all the other things that shouldn't be in school right now, I don't believe these vaping devices are allowed in school at this time. I don't believe cigarettes are allowed in school at this time or chewing tobacco. I don't believe alcohol is allowed in school at this time, but I believe that they're all there. We'd be a fool to say that kids don't have chew in their locker or a cigarette where they can run outside and do something. We've passed laws like this before, but youth find a way around it. I believe if we outlawed these vaping devices, that they can't go buy them, they will make them. I mean, all you need is something to heat the water vapor up, something to hold the nicotine, and they will make their own devices. So I think we really need to take a look at this and the way we're going. With that, I think I'd like to yield my time to Senator Wayne, if you'd like to have it.
Thanks, Senator Lowe. Senator Wayne, 2 minutes if you care to use it. He waves it off. Members, Senator Walz would like to recognize some guests today. We have with us 3 fourth graders from St. Wenceslaus School in Dodge, Nebraska. Those students are with us in the North Balcony. Could those St. Wenceslaus fourth graders please rise? I'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. And Senator Coltman has 19 fourth graders from the Emmanuel Faith Lutheran School in York, Nebraska, also in the North Balcony. Could the Emmanuel Lutheran fourth graders please rise? I'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing discussion, Senator Blood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow senators, friends all, I still stand opposed to both amendments and the bill, and I really want you to be listening to today's debate and not have your mind made up. I encourage you, if you've not done so already, to bring the bill up and read the bill. Do a little Googling, see what the tobacco industry is doing right now, and let's just not be fools when it comes to this bill. So I know that we all agree that we want to protect the children of Nebraska. That is something that we stand firm on, and I agree as well. But I don't think this bill is ready for prime time, and I didn't when I was in committee. I had issues with it in committee, and Senator Quick, among many of you, is my dear friend, and it was his priority bill, and I felt that he might fix it before it hit the floor. And I don't feel that we're there yet. We talk about the vaping. I think there's some misinformation that's been said, not by Senator Quick. You know, a lot of the flavoring compounds themselves, they actually kill cells in children and adults. There's 3 flavorings that have been found to cause very specific issues when it comes to the cells in our body, and I think that's kind of a scary thing, and I don't think that information is getting out, and it's not getting out because the tobacco industry doesn't want it out. Senator Quick talked about the high levels of nickel, and there's also high levels of chromium, things that cause lung cancer and neurological deficits, lung, nasal, and sinus cancer, respiratory tract irritation. So a lot of the same things that we're already seeing with smoking. But how are municipalities supposed to be enforcing this? And what kind of cost is that going to bring to the municipalities? That's a big concern for me. How can we ask people to go to war at 18, but we say they can't smoke or vape, regardless of how bad it's for them? Are we saying that we are less concerned about people being blown up in battle than we are about them vaping? And I can't get my brain wrapped around that right now, and I'm not sure where I'm at on that point. I do like what South Carolina did, that if you are 18 years of age and younger, you can't go into a vape shop without an adult, right? That to me makes sense. So the concerns I have is, can we do better? The other concern I have, and this is kind of a selfish concern because our budget is kind of in a mess, is excise taxes. I'm doing some quick math, and I'm thinking 1 million to 1.4 million is what we're going to lose if we raise it to age 21. Now we can say, well, Senator Blood, isn't the health of these people more important? Well, the health of these people it is more important. But sometimes I think that we try and regulate morality from things like virtual gaming, especially when it comes to sports, huh, Senator Breezy? We'll never see eye to eye on that one. To what we do sometimes with alcohol, sometimes what we do with pornography. What is our gray area? And I'm just afraid that we're so busy trying to regulate morality and put our own personal thoughts forward that we're not looking at what this bill is really doing. And what this bill is doing is creating secondary hurdles, especially for municipalities. It's narrowly defining things, which I think is going to allow the industry to go crazy, and not crazy in favor, but crazy behind our backs. And we aren't really even talking about what the federal government's doing right now. And the federal government has a big push when it comes to vaping. And so do we need to regulate the state? And lastly, the schools already have laws in place, policy in place that prevents kids from doing this. Raising the age isn't going to change any of that. So again, I want everybody to be thinking about this. Please do your research. Don't just decide how you're going to vote without really listening to what's going on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or President. I apologize.
Thanks, Senator Blood. Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I have in my left hand the Journal of the Nebraska Legislature. It is opened to page 664, and that is the page from which I will read. And this includes everybody in the legislature: Albright, Arch, Blood, Bowles, Bosselman, Brandt, Brewer, Breezy, Kavanaugh, Clements, Crawford, DeBoer, Dorn, Erdman, Friesen, Geist, Gregert, Groney, Halloran, Hanson B., Hanson M., Hilgers, Hilkeman, Howard, Hughes, Hunt, Kalowski, Coulterman, Lathrop, Legrone, Lindstrom, Lenahan, Lowe, McCollister, McDonald, Moorfeld, Moser, Merman, Pansing Brooks, Quick, Shear, Slama, Stenner, Vargas, Williams, Walls, and Wayne comes after Walls. Williams, Wishart. You're welcome. You got your pink slip today, which accompanies that voucher or whatever it is they call it, which when you sign, you can get your expenses. Sometimes we're a little forgetful, and I like to remind us of essential things. And the reason I'm being a little facetious this morning, this is a policy discussion, and on issues where a policy is involved, there can be, and usually will be, honest differences of opinion. Sometimes a person may be opposed to a particular proposition, proposition if it's a prohibition against a certain kind of conduct on the basis that enforcement may be difficult. The only law I'm aware of that every creature who is a part of the animal kingdom must obey, willingly or not, that is the law that every one of these living creatures shall and must die. Anything else may have holes in it which will allow some people to escape. When a law is passed, it has to be something directed at the generality of people. There will always be somebody who can find a way around a law. What has to be done, in my opinion, is for the lawmakers to consider whether or not an activity that is to be prohibited is one which, if not prohibited, will cause substantial harm to a segment of the population, if not all of the population. To give an example, let's say you have a law that says it is a crime to steal your neighbor's turkeys, and everybody in that community raises the same kind of turkeys. So a person may say, we shouldn't have a law like that because the idea of proving which turkey is yours is virtually impossible. There are two distinct matters involved here. Whether the conduct ought to be prohibited. Stealing somebody's turkeys should be prohibited. The matter of proof is entirely separate. There are general laws and requirements relative to how you prove a fact in order to establish that a crime was committed. So, It's against the law to steal your neighbor's turkeys, even if it's difficult to prove that the turkeys you say are yours would be difficult. In this instance, I think the law that's being proposed is good. I believe the amendment is good. I'm going to support both, and as yet I haven't heard anything that would persuade me to take a position to the contrary. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Albright.
Thank you, President Foley. I rise in support of LB 149. I signed on to this bill early on, and it's interesting how things unfold as they go on and through the system. But, you know, and Senator Blood, sorry, I appreciate her bringing to our attention this age, because to me, I don't want our children exposed to nicotine any sooner than they need to be. My other concern is, if we remember Trooper Bell that used to be on the floor with us here, he's now in the schools, and you know, we had a conversation and he said it is bad, and we don't know what's inside that electronic vaping device. Is it just tobacco, or is it nicotine, or is it something more? I'm still listening, because these other two amendments, I've never bought a pack of cigarettes, I had to go outside and the glass and ask how old do you have to be to even purchase a pack of cigarettes. So if it's 18 now, you know, maybe we do need to talk about whether these, whoever's buying these vaping devices for the children need to, it's a third-degree misdemeanor, I understand, if you provide that to a young person. But when you're in the schools and you don't want them to have them, it's like, you know, put your vaping devices away along with your cell phone so that the teachers can teach you something. But I am very much concerned about early exposure for our youth. You know, when it comes to going to the service and being able to smoke and drink, that's completely a different subject, I think. I think what we're here to talk about is our youth and how they are able to get this, and what we can do to keep these things away from the children. So that's my big deal. I would think if you're talking about age, to make it simplified, it would be like, if you have to be 21 to drink, wouldn't you have to be 21 to smoke? But that's been talked about, when it comes to revenue for people, but it's just like taxing cigarettes. I mean, why, when you do that, you take them outside of our state and they start buying somewhere else? I mean, if you're going to have an age, is it 19 or is it 21? I don't know. I'm still open to listening, and you know, that's why we have general file. There's a lot that can happen between now and select. But you know, I'm looking at the committee statement, and 5 people, Arch, Brandt, Blood, Hunt, and Lowe, allowed it to go out. But Senator Wayne was a no, and Senator Mosier was absent, and Senator Breezy was present, not voting. So I do believe that we need to make certain that what we're doing here is for the right reasons and for the greater good of our public. And again, when I stand thinking about children getting hooked on nicotine and watching loved ones die because they did smoke all their life, it's not fun. So this is a serious bill that needs to have a lot of thought put into it before we all decide to vote and make certain that it's the right bill. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Albright. Senator Hilgers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I rise in opposition to AM 1478, and I think it's part of a broader conversation about what is the age of the majority. At what age should we allow people to be able to exercise their particular freedoms? And I think in general, the public policy of the state in general has been that the age of the majority is not 21. And we do have an exception for that particular age, and that's in the case of alcohol. And I think when you talk about alcohol and you talk about, the prohibition and the unique history this country has had, I mean, there's no amendment to the United States Constitution dealing with smoking cigarettes. But with alcohol, we've had a unique history. There's a reason why we have 21. It's not just because of our challenges over the decades, but also because of the federal government and the tie to federal transportation funding, which is why many of the states have an age of 21 for consumption. So I agree with Senator Blood. If you can serve in the military, you should be able to smoke cigarettes. I think there are other exceptions to that non-21 age of the majority rule, and that's for where you have to, you might need to be 35 to be president, for instance, or areas in which we think you need to have a certain age to be able to exercise certain professional judgment. I don't think that applies in the instance of smoking. So whether you think it's good or bad, or whether you think it's harmful or not, I think that's somewhat secondary. At the end of the day, we're talking about people's freedom, and I think we need to draw a line, and I think the line that's worked well for this state over many years is not 21 for these types of things. So with that, I would oppose AM 1478. As for the underlying bill, I know there's some other amendments and conversations from Senator Wayne and others, and so I will withhold comment until we get to that particular issue. But for the amendment in front of us, I will vote red on 1478, and I'd yield the rest of my time to Senator Blood.
Thank you, Senator Hilgers. Senator Blood, you've been yielded 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Hilgers. Again, I stand opposed to both the amendments and the bill as is. And Senator Albright was correct that I did vote it out of committee, as I said earlier, with the understanding that the wonky stuff was going to be fixed before it hit the floor, and that's not where we ended up at. And so, unfortunately, now I stand here opposed. And shame on me for voting it out of committee, but I had good intentions, since it was a priority bill, that things would be corrected. So again, let's go back to some of the issues that we have. How is this supposed to be enforced? And you can't say the same way as cigarettes, because we're talking about very different products. What is our goal with this bill? If our goal is to keep it out of schools, schools already have policies that don't allow this, right? They don't allow alcohol, they don't allow cigarettes, they don't allow vaping. So we think by making it harder, these things aren't going to happen. I'm not seeing that statistically when I look at other states. And that's a concern for me. And are we creating an issue for the people who in schools who have to check for this? Because one of the reasons vaping is so prevalent and why vaping has increased is because of the size of the product, right? So a cigarette, pretty obvious when you have a cigarette, you're not going to be holding it under your shirt, right? It has smoke. It doesn't have steam. This is a very small product that many people say looks like a flash drive depending on what brand you buy. So is this going to change that? And I'm not sure that it's going to. And we can say, well, we want to make things as hard as we possibly can so the children aren't affected. And I get that. But I look at alcohol, I look at tobacco, I look at vaping, I look at pornography. And unfortunately, those things are readily available and easy for anybody to get should they want to get it. And so where are we going to stop with this? If we can write it in a way that is less narrow when it comes to the Clean Air Act, I might be more supportive. But again, too, I represent Offutt Air Force Base, and I'm hoping that Senator Brewer has something to say on this as well. And there are a lot of people concerned because they're willing to give their lives, but we're going to disallow them the opportunity to vape if they choose to do so to their bodies. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Blood. Senator Friesen.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, one of the reasons, there's numerous reasons for changing it to 21, and one of them is the ability for store clerks to recognize the ID. It doesn't take much to, when you get turned 21, you receive a driver's license that is horizontal. Up until then, you have one that's vertical. And so when you go into the store, you show your driver's license. They don't have to look at the date. They just look at your driver's license. They can tell immediately if you're 21 or you're younger. You know, we can make the argument about age of majority and everything else, but if we're talking about eating donuts or something like that and you can't do it till you're 18, they don't really hurt you. When you're talking about smoking, I don't think there's anybody can deny that smoking causes health risks. Maybe some people don't see it, but the majority of the evidence shows that there is damage from smoking. And what we're doing is we're letting young minds, whether they're vaping or doing whatever they do, it gets them hooked on nicotine, and that's what's in cigarettes. And there has definitely been damage done to people who smoke. And we're saying, well, okay, if you're 19 years old, you're old enough to go to war, you know, you're old enough to carry a gun, you're old enough to serve in the military, but no, we don't really care about your health long term. Go ahead and light up a cigarette. Just do your job. You can have your smokes. I think when they're overseas, I don't think there's any issue there whatsoever. If they can find cigarettes, they're going to smoke cigarettes. I don't think anybody's going to look at their ID. Nobody's going to question whether they're 21 or not. But while they're serving here, and we're paying for their health care, and we're going to continue to pay for their health care down the road, I don't know why we would encourage them to smoke cigarettes. At the very least, we can treat it like alcohol, which also has its issues, and let's make it 21. They'll be a little bit older, a little bit wiser. Not as wise as Senator Chambers yet at 80-some years old, but we'll get there eventually. But give them a chance. And I know as a young person, it's very easy to join in some of the vices because everybody else is doing it. And once you're hooked, you can't give it up. And I've talked to people who took that first puff of the cigarette, and they will tell you they knew they were hooked forever. That rush of adrenaline they got, that feeling they got, never went away, and they knew they were hooked one time. So changing it to the age of 21 to me is a very simple change. It's not a big change, but it's enough of a change that I think it warrants doing, and I do not see a reason why we would leave it at 19. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Senator Bosselman.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if Senator Quick would yield to a question.
Senator Quick, yield, please.
Yes, I will.
There's a debate or discussion on the bill and the intent of the bill and why the bill is being brought a little bit, and I want to go back to that briefly with you about you spoke about schools a little bit ago. What is your intent, or why is it that you brought this bill?
My main objective is because, like I said, it come from a school board member in Grand Island, and it's addressed the issue of kids vaping in our schools. And I think that's, with raising the age, that's the part we can address by getting it out of the hands of our children. And we have a big problem with kids getting addicted to nicotine, and we don't know the long-term health care effects also from some of the chemicals in the vaping products.
Okay, thank you. So we're really focusing on the vaping, the device, that type of thing that's affecting our children, the students in school, trying to remove that opportunity, if you will, from those, especially 18 and under in our schools, trying to help our schools to be able to manage that better within the school systems itself. Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate, yes.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Senator Quick. I appreciate that. This is a step in the right direction. I do support LB 149 and AM 901. I'm not so sure that I support AM 1478 at this point in time. I have been in the schools talking to our superintendents and principals. In fact, I'm getting some emails from them now talking about the importance of this bill and the challenges they have in their school. And part of it comes down to the device and understanding what they use. You can't, in the Juul, it's very hard for them to determine from a flash drive, a stick, to what the Juul device is. They don't, it's so easily hid, it's so easily used. It's an issue for them, it's a significant issue for them, and they're having a hard time addressing that within the school. So this goes a long ways, I think, in helping with that. And the thing is I guess the question I have is with Senator Breezy, if he would yield to a question on devices.
Senator Breezy, yield, please.
Yes. In your amendment, how does this address the device itself?
Well, this language
is essentially same language that the FDA uses and several other states use, and device is defined fairly specifically here as talking about the system itself, components of the system, and again, this language makes it or prohibits the use of this device by the underage folks, providing this device to underage folks, acquiring this device by underage folks through misrepresentation, and again, device is fairly broadly defined, and so the device here is the key, and the definition of device, I would say, is the key.
Thank you, Senator Breeze, and I agree. And that's what I'm hearing from, I think, some of my school officials, is that device language is key in this bill, one of the key parts in this bill, because it is so easy for students to bring devices in, to vape, to Juul, to dab, whatever those things are, in the school system now. They have a very difficult time in managing that, I guess you would say. And the importance of the bill is to have a strong policy from this body saying that those students, those schools, need to be able to keep those devices, need to be able to work together to eliminate the use of these products by our young people in the schools. It is very much so an issue that has and is in our school. When I talk to our counselors, when I talk to juvenile justice folks, everybody that talks, this is a problem. I understand there's concern with cancer, tobacco, those type of things. To me, that's a separate issue. We can deal with that separately. Let's deal with that in another bill in another time. Let's look at what we're talking about here today. Students in school, high school, junior high, elementary school, that have access to these products. Juul themselves has come out and said, we're changing how we market and do things in the country. We're changing the age requirements as far as online purchases. We're changing how we do with what we do with flavors and that. So they've identified it as a problem. This is just a great step in the right direction, and helping us and helping our schools and helping our youth to not being addicted and not using these devices and these opportunities, even cigarettes or tobacco, until a certain age. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Bossman. Before proceeding, Senator Quick announced a very special guest visiting today. We have with us Alice Quick, Senator Quick's wife from Grand Island. Alice is with us on the north balcony. Alice, please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing discussion, Senator Groney.
Thank you. When I first seen this bill and when I talked to my local public health people, the big concern the new fad was this vaping and nicotine. But then I said, right away in your mind, it goes nicotine, cigarettes, cancer, death. But then I got thinking about it. When I went off to college, I started a bad habit of smoking because I never had a study before, and it kept me at the books. But then 10 years later, I quit. I tried to quit, couldn't quit. Went to the doctor, and you know the medicine he gave me to quit? It was nicotine. Nicotine is considered a medicine. Tar and the other things in cigarettes is what caused the cancer, not nicotine. So I did a little research on nicotine. It's no more addictive than the addictions we all have. Caffeine, sugar is the bad one. Sugar kills more people than any of the other ones do, except for alcohol. But nicotine causes no health effects, none that they can find. No cause of cancer. Oh, it has health effects. Just like too much sugar does, it makes you sleepy. You have to eat too much pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving. But nicotine itself is not a harmful chemical. So we're all young once, and we look for our peer groups, and what are we going to do? Do we go hang with the guys who go out and buy alcohol? Do we hang with the kids who smoke pot? Or do we want an alternative to tell those other two groups, no, I'm going to go vape? I got a group of guys that go down to the local vaping store, and we sit around and we vape. They're not the athletes or the best students, but they're looking for a group. So last Saturday, I went around North Platte and stopped in two of the stores there, They were run by, one was run by a young man and his mother. Another one was by another young entrepreneur. And I asked, what kind of people do you get in here? They said, oh, they're just average folks. More than half of them are folks who are trying to quit smoking. The younger ones are kids just wanting to hang together. I said, did they get violent? Did they get drunk? Did they go out and drive and crash? No, they're good kids, younger people. So I'm sitting here thinking, are we confusing tar and the other cancer-causing ingredients of cigarettes with a non-harmful addictive substance of nicotine that's no more addictive than caffeine or sugar? Now, if these kids, I didn't hear from any of the school people that they catch a young person vaping, that all of a sudden they're acting up in school, they're acting strange, they're failing their grades, they're not showing up for school the next day. We are a free society, and we're all addicted to something. Either caffeine. If you give up sugar, people, which my brother, who's a doctor, keeps preaching me, I will live a lot longer. I'll never forget the doctor when he gave me that Nicorette gum, and I went in and I was supposed to chew 4 tabs a day. I was a 3-pack-a-day smoker because, you know, my personality. And I wasn't 4 tabs a day, I was chewing more like 24. And I said, is this going to harm me? He said, Mike, nobody's ever died of cancer because they had too much nicotine. Nobody's overdosed on Nicorette gum. He said, chew as many as you have to quit smoking. And I quit smoking. So where do I stand on this? We have a couple of storefronts in North Platte that now are filled with young people who have an adult in the room watching over them, that are not on a dirt road drinking alcohol with the wrong group, or out smoking pot in somebody's basement. They've found a group of people that they can hang with and tell the other ones, no, I don't do that. I don't smoke, I don't take drugs, I vape. There's no harm in nicotine as a substance. It's addictive, just like a lot of substances in our life. So anyway, I stand in opposition to LB 149. Originally I was for it, but I got to face the facts. Nicotine ain't harmful, tar is. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Groening. Senator LaGrone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to AM 1478. I do think there is a conflict here between something that we all, that a lot of us can agree is a good goal to achieve, which is keeping vaping out of our schools, and then the other value that we have of personal freedom. And this is really stark for me today. My nephew Jackson's actually here on his 4th grade tour today, so that really brings home for me the need to take these products out of our schools. But I think that can be achieved without raising the age all the way to 21, and that's something we can get more into on Senator Wayne's amendment when we get to it. But I think Senator Blood was absolutely correct when she talked about how if you are able to serve in the military and fight for your country, you should be able to make the choice of whether or not this is something that you are going to participate in or that something that you feel is that you want to do. So with that, I would encourage a red vote on AM 1478, and I look forward to the discussion on Senator Wayne's subsequent amendment, and I would yield the remainder of my time to Senator Wayne.
Thanks, Senator LaGrone. Senator Wayne, 3 minutes 45.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator LaGrone. I won't take up all this time. I think we need to get to a vote on this issue. I don't know if this is turning into an extended debate or what. I just want to reiterate that this bill came out of committee at 19. I think there was an additional agreement to remove the Clean Door Air Act from this and keep the licensure, which is what my amendment does. But nevertheless, I think there's going to be hard pressed, and I think people need to understand that if this goes to 21, there isn't the votes here on this body. That you've heard most committee members speak out against this at 21. It would have never got out of committee at 21. And on select file, if I heard correctly, Senator Blood made a comment about extended debate, which I will agree with, that I will take part in. We really have to think about, do you want this to get out of schools or do you want this to go to 21? As a body, that's what we have to think about. I'm willing to come back next year and work on language for exemptions and everything else, but that's a whole lot of stakeholders we have to bring in to make sure that we understand the enforcement and the practical implications of anything like an exemption or anything like that. And I can't do that on the floor, nor will I do that on the floor. That's a bigger conversation across the entire industry, and I don't think it's good necessarily policy to, when dealing with the industry that can fundamentally change the industry, that we just do it on the floor. So with that, I would ask for a red vote on AM 1478. Allow me to do a short opening on my bill or my amendment, and then vote green on that, then vote green on the underlining bill and move this thing forward. But I think at 21, colleagues need to understand that this won't move forward, and the issue for your schools will still remain, at least for another year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Senator Brandt.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Thank you, Senator Quick, for bringing this bill. I support this bill, and I was one of the 5 people that brought it out of committee. And as you observe what everybody on the committee has said, it looks like we have 5 different opinions of the 5 people that came out of committee, and then you've got 3 other people that have an opinion on this. And I'm all right with 19 or 21. The bulk of the testimony that day was about the schools. And 2 years ago, they said they had 7% in the schools, and these were big schools. This was Grand Island and Millard and principals from these schools that testified. Last year, they had 20% of their students that are vaping. And of that 20%, in the testimony, 7% of these students had THC in this vape. And it's very difficult, the way technology moves, for the schools and everybody to keep up with this. So I guess I wanted the body to be aware of that. Senator Quick, would you yield for a question?
Senator Quick, yield, please.
Yes, I will.
Senator Quick, is there a provision in your bill for possession of vaping products?
I don't know how that, I know it addresses purchase of the products, but I do think that I don't know how they treat tobacco products right now. If a law enforcement officer sees someone smoking who they think it might be underage, but it would be a classified misdemeanor, I would think. I know for purchase, but I don't know if that also covers possession.
All right, thank you. Senator Gregor, would you yield for a question?
Senator Gregor, yield, please.
Yes, I will.
We've had a lot of discussion this morning about 18-year-olds can serve their country. My daughter serves our country. She's in the Air Force, but she's past 21. If you were 18 on a military base and you wanted to buy tobacco, could you do that?
Well, personal experience, I went in the military when I was 18, and at that time, the drinking age was 19. So I made the decision to go into the military with that. I wasn't drafted, it was volunteer. And yes, I was able to drink on base, but I could not drink off base at that time. So
what about tobacco products?
Tobacco, I'm not sure. I was never a smoker.
Okay, but today, my understanding is if you serve in the military, you could be 18 and buy tobacco products on any base, even if the state you're in is 21.
If it was back when I went in, certainly that would be the case, that you'd be able to buy cigarettes at 18 on base.
All right, thank you. Senator Blood, would you yield for a question?
Senator Blood, would you yield, please?
I would be happy to yield, my friend.
All right, thank you. In the testimony, if I remember correctly, the vape shop owners testified that there were hundreds of different flavors that these vape products could be. You could go in and select strawberry or lemon or whatever. Does that ring a bell?
That would be accurate.
Okay. And your opposition is because the bill doesn't go far enough to include all of these products?
We're not just talking about flavors, we're talking about things like caffeine. So and caffeine, marijuana, there's multiple things that can be put into this product that I don't feel are addressed in the bill.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Hildress, would you yield for a question?
Senator Hildress, yield, please.
Be happy to.
Senator Hildress, you heard Senator Groney testify nicotine is good for you. Do you believe that?
1 minute.
I'm not sure he said it was good for you. I think he said it wasn't harmful, is what I recall him saying.
Okay. Do you have a problem with making it 21 to obtain nicotine?
Yes.
Why?
For the reason I stated before, which is that the general age of the majority is either 18 or 19, and I think at that point you ought to be able to have freedom to choose. The one exception we generally have is for alcohol, and I think that's a special case.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, I stand in support of AM 1478, AM 901, and LB 149. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brandt. Senator Chambers, you recognize. It's your third opportunity.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, you see how nice I can be when you bring a sensible bill? Look at the different individuals with whom I am agreeing this morning. And that biblical verse is, oh, how wonderful it is when brethren, and I'll add, and sisterin, to dwell together in peace. There is an agency of government. It's called the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Bureau. It shows that the view is that all of these items, even though they're disparate in nature, are harmful, even though there are some circumstances when it is legal to use any or all of them. But because of the potential for misuse, this Bureau is in place to deal with those wrongful uses of it. Senator Groney said everybody is addicted to something. I'm addicted to living. He said that sugar, if you give it up, you'll live longer. I like sugar. I'm talking about, the product. If you give up sugar, you don't live longer. It just seems like you're living longer. Life is hard without sugar. C&H, I knew that commercial. C&H, pure cane sugar from Hawaii, growing in the sun. Island sugars. Oh, Senator Wayne gave me that look, so I won't sing the rest of it. But that was one of my favorite songs. In all seriousness, some things have to be done incrementally. And when you're trying to protect young people, which I think is a valid and appropriate role for government to play, you would not be wise to come down with a sledgehammer approach and list all of the things you'd rather young people not do and make all of them against the law. So you pick those which, even if alone, may not be something that would kill a person, but understanding the nature of youth, because we all were young, one thing can lead to another and another. And that argument is often given when there's a particular item that somebody does not want to be made available to young people. I have always wanted to get rid of the death penalty, notwithstanding the fact that it was passed over a governor's veto at one point. Lay that aside. Down through the decades, I couldn't get it. So I wanted to do things that would take away the approval of violence by the government or any entity of government. So the first thing I was able to do was get corporal punishment out of the public schools. Then when it came to the death penalty, prohibit it from being applied to people. At that time, the term was mentally retarded. The next one was to set an age limit. Anybody who committed what would ordinarily make him or her eligible to the death penalty, anybody who committed such an offense, if committed before the age of 18, could not be subject to the death penalty. Both of those latter two things, the U.S. Supreme Court followed Nebraska's lead. Senator Brandt may be the one who mentioned that the 5 people who voted this out of committee may have each had a different reason. If you read court opinions by the Supreme Court, you will see that they will often have opinions where every judge on the prevailing side wrote a separate opinion to explain why he or she supported it. But together, they came as a group and reached a decision that was binding on everybody. As for the young people going to war, the Bible said, old men for counsel, young men for war. Young men have always been the fodder of war, F-O-D-D-E-R. Old men make wars, young men fight them. So that is such an aberration. It should not be used as a standard for anything except to show how younger people can be dealt with unjustly by the older people, even to the point of losing their lives for slogans and nothing of consequence. I support this amendment before us, and I support the bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Quick, you recognize your third opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the things and I know all of you have seen these articles or saw the news clips on our local stations addressing the vaping issue in our schools. This is the main reason I'm bringing this bill, is to help our children and to keep these products out of their hands. And just as recent, this last Sunday, we had 2 articles in the Grand Island Independent talking about children vaping in schools. This is an important issue that we need to face, that we need to address. And I think if we don't address it now, we're going to be addressing it in the future, because we're going to have a whole generation addicted to nicotine. Now, I know Senator Groney maybe disagree with me on nicotine addiction, but what I would tell you is it affects behavior, it affects brain development. The studies show it, and I can tell you I have someone very close to me that works on labor and delivery, and she's seen babies addicted to nicotine. The mother has used nicotine throughout her pregnancy, and when that baby is born, that baby has serious issues with nicotine addiction. It is a serious problem, and that's my main concern with this bill. I know it's not perfect. It's not perfect for everyone. I've tried to work with everyone. If I work with someone on one side, then I have opposition from the other side. If I work with that side, then I have opposition from the other side. So my big thing was to work with the Attorney General's office to help bring the language that would best suit this bill. I really want 21. I know that there's some people that object to that. I think the big thing with 21, the study shows, and I have a study here, and I wish I'd handed it out to everyone, but it had a study at age 19, it had a study at age 21 and 25. And 21 was the best age at which to effectively reduce nicotine consumption for minors and reduce the use of tobacco products. And I think that's something that we need to really think about when we vote on this. I think 21 should be the age. I think I had agreement from, I was really surprised when I was bringing this bill, because I just brought it for vaping products and I wasn't going to touch tobacco, but I wanted to find out what my opposition would be. So I talked to some people in the tobacco industry. They said, take us to 21 as well. I talked to retailers. They said, either leave it at 18 or take us to 21, but don't put us at 19. Because it makes it harder for us to recalculate every time we have to train new employees. I think the 21 will be easy for retailers in the fact that they can just look at the shape of the license and they'll see that you're a 21-year-old. So, and I think that'll help address a lot of our issues in the school system and help these children. I mean, I want you to really think about it, because, like I say, this could affect us later on. I've always said, invest in our children on the front end. Don't wait till we have to fix all the problems that we have. Why don't we address it now? And that could be anything from detention issues to, I believe, with health issues for children. The sooner we can help them, the more benefits that we will receive as a state, and the less dollars that we will have to put out later on. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Quick. Senator Merman.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I rise in support of LB 149 and also AM 901, and I'm a little bit undecided yet on 1478. I don't have a lot to add, but I just thought I better mention that as I campaigned in the district in the last year, I did hear from school officials that they would appreciate the support in raising the age to keep vaping out of the schools. Of course, it's not allowed in schools now, but it just gives them a little bit extra support by raising that age. And I also did hear from healthcare providers, and they did say that there are dangers of vaping. Vaping isn't nearly as dangerous as juuling. I don't know a lot about the difference between the two, but as I understand it, it's really hard to distinguish if a person is actually vaping or juuling. So the healthcare providers did tell me that because of a young person's developing brain, that it is important to keep that legal age as high as possible. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Senator Merman. Senator Lowe.
Question.
The question's been called. Do I see 5 hands? I do. The question is, shall debate cease? Those in favor of ceasing debate, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
31 ayes, 2 nays to cease debate.
Debate does cease. Senator Friesen, you're recognized to close on AM 1478.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, this is a very simple bill. It just changes the date and makes it 21 to purchase all tobacco products and vaping products. Again, I think it's a good amendment, and overall, I think it's a good bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Friesen. Question for the body is the adoption of AM 1478. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? It's been a request to place the House on a call. The question is, shall the House go on a call? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
24 ayes, 8 nays to place the House under call.
House under call. All senators, please return to your desks and check in. The House is under call. Unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Roll call vote has been requested when we have everyone under call. Reverse order. Thank you. Senator Crawford, McDonald, Hilkeman, Speaker Scheer. The House on a call. All unexcused members are now present. The question for the body is the adoption of AM 1478. There's been a request for a roll call vote in reverse order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Wishart, voting no. Sir Williams. Sir Wayne, voting no. Sir Walls, voting yes. Sir Vargas, voting yes. Sir Stinner, voting yes. Sir Slama, voting no. Sir Shear, voting no. Sir Quick, voting yes. Sir Pansing Brooks, voting yes. Sir Merman, voting yes. Sir Moser, voting no. Sir Moorfeld, voting no. Sir McDonald, voting yes. Senator McAllister, not voting. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator Linehan, voting yes. Senator Lindstrom, voting no. Senator Lathrop, voting yes. Sir Legrone, voting no. Sir Coulterman, voting no. Sir Kolowski, voting yes. Sir Hunt, voting no. Sir Hughes, voting yes. Sir Howard, voting yes. Sir Hilkelman, voting yes. Sir Hilders, voting no. Sir Matt Hansen, voting yes. Sir Ben Hansen, voting no. Sir Holleran, voting yes. Sir Groney, voting no. Sir Gregert, voting no. Sir Geist, voting no. Sir Friesen, voting yes. Sir Erdman, voting yes. Sir Dorn, voting yes. Sir DeBoer, voting no. Sir Crawford. Sir Crawford, thank you. Voting no. Sir Clements, voting no. Sir Chambers, voting yes. Sir Kavanaugh, voting yes. Sir Breesy, voting no. Sir Brewer, voting no. Sir Brandt, voting yes. Sir Bostelman, voting no. Sir Bowles, voting yes. Sir Blood, voting no. Sir Arch, voting no. Sir Albright, voting no. 22 ayes, 25 nays, Mr. President.
AM 1478 is not adopted. I raise the call. Items to the record, please.
Before we proceed, Mr. President, thank you. Explanation of the votes from Senator Matt Hansen and Senator Wayne. I have a new A bill, 657A by Senator Wayne. It appropriates funds to implement 657. Enrollment and review reports, LBs 184, 478, 595, 96, 538A, 179, 468, 418, 560, 433, and 86, all to select files, some having enrollment and review amendments. New resolution, LR 97 by Senator Kavanaugh and others, asking the legislature to recognize April 2019 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And Senator Lowe offers LR 98, which is an interim study that will be referred to the Executive Board. Mr. President, with respect to Legislative Bill 149, Senator Wayne would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 1228.
Senator Wayne, recognized to open on AM 1228.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. This amendment comes from, which was the understanding on at least 3 members on the committee, if not more, which was to take it to 19 and to remove it from the Clean Indoor Act. I won't spend a lot of time on the amendment because we had a pretty good discussion already going, and I guess I could hop in here. The reason I'm removing this from the Indoor Clean Air Act is because under the current bill, even vape stores or vape shops, you wouldn't be allowed to vape in. And that makes absolutely no sense. It still requires a licensure. It still requires a lot of the other things in the bill. They have to be 19 years old. But there is no exemption at all underneath the current bill and even the amendment that allows vape stores or vape places to at least have vaping inside of there. This bill goes a step further by saying it doesn't even apply to the Clean Indoor Act because the studies just aren't there. Colleagues, there is not empirical data that shows that there are harmful chemicals that come from the vapor, the exhaust, if you want to call it. It is literally water. Now, there are some elements that are in these chemicals, like they are regulated, there's different product qualities that have trace amounts of something. But it's nowhere near, it's not harmful, and there's no evidence to show that somebody sitting next to you will inhale that and have any chemical or biological reaction. that is similar, that is opposite of what happened in tobacco. In tobacco, there were numerous of studies, years and years of empirical data to show that if somebody's sitting next to somebody and they were to blow out smoke, it wasn't the nicotine, it was all the other harmful chemicals that came out with the smoke that harmed the person sitting next to the person. We don't have any data. If your local bar and you feel they're upset or you're upset about people vaping, that is a bar owner's decision to do that. As it comes to a public health concern, the data just isn't there. There's no data. We spent a lot of time, especially many of my colleagues in the last couple of days, arguing about data and science. It's just not there to support indoor ban. Again, this was an agreement that I thought, my colleague Senator Lowe thought, another colleague on the committee, I believe, I'll let that individual speak because I didn't talk to her before I got here, all agreed that these two things would be the bill. We voted it out of committee because we were trying to get it on the agenda faster because we knew the importance of this issue to Senator Quick. While it did take a little bit to get on the agenda, there was still the understanding that an amendment would be brought. At one point, Senator Lowe and I had a discussion about, well, then one of us are going to bring the amendment, and I said I would do it. I'm just asking this body to hold the agreement that was in place coming out of our committee to be the standard here. That when you have an agreement among colleagues, you support that agreement and you move forward. Again, the data is not there to support an Indoor Air Act or this falling underneath there. It makes no sense that if you own a vape store, and now that you're having to be licensed even under my amendment, that you cannot smoke that product in there. So you cannot try it out, you cannot do anything in the own store. That makes no sense to me. And again, the 19 requirement solves the issue that Senator Quick, Senator Bostelman, myself, and others are trying to deal with around this vape product being inside of schools, inside of our school buildings. So I would ask for a green vote on AM 1228, and I would ask to support the underlining bill. And with that, I will answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Going to the discussion, those waiting in the queues, Senator Groney, Erdman, Quick, and others. Senator Groney, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Clarification, I did not say nicotine was good for you. What I said was nicotine, no evidence that it causes cancer, or that it's any more harmful to you than caffeine or sugar, which are addictive substances. Nicotine is a natural occurring product in the nightshade plants. When you eat a potato, a tomato, or an eggplant, you are consuming nicotine. Smoking is bad for you. Senator Wayne made it clear, he made a good evidence of it. It's the tar and the smoke and the carcinogens in the smoke that cause you problems, not the nicotine. I've seen this before, but here's just one study from the Brown University Child and Adolescent Behavior Letter. The dramatic increase in teen vaping, this is the headline, is the largest public health success story in our lifetime. We have spent millions of tobacco money, tobacco settlement money, hired people to go out and try to convince our youth not to smoke. The biggest reduction in youth smoking has occurred as vaping has risen. I got to look at the facts, folks. So now you're going to have a lot of 18-year-olds looking for a thrill, are going to gag, throw up when they smoke their first 3 cigarettes, but they're going to feel a lightheadedness and a utopia. And they will put up with that disgusting smoke in their lungs to get that nicotine thrill. There is absolutely no evidence that anybody who starts vaping then decides to put disgusting smoke in their lungs and cough and hack so that they can get the high of nicotine when they already have had that thrill with a sweet tasting additive to the vaping. That's reality. Smoking is terrible, smoking is bad. Nicotine is just another common drug that occurs naturally in our plants, like caffeine, and sugars. Do we want people to take anything that alters their personalities? Alcohol, that's why we take it. It alters who we are. Caffeine, we take caffeine because it alters and adjusts our personalities or euphoria. Sugar is the same way. Nicotine is the same way. There are others out there. It's human nature. We don't like ourselves, or for some other reason, we do these things to our body. But that isn't the argument here. Is nicotine bad for a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old to do, or is them going down and paying $6 for a pack of cigarettes a public health issue? Nicotine is not. Cigarettes are. So as far as the schools go, enforce it. Put a rule in that you do not allow vaping, any kind of a product of vaping in your school, or you face expulsion, just like if you bought a six-pack of beer or a small jug of whiskey to school. You can do that. Each school can do that. I don't understand what this does to change that. If kids can get pot, which is completely illegal in the state of Nebraska, and it's an epidemic, they're surely going to get some vaping material that some 19-year-old buy for them.
1 minute.
They can get alcohol, which we've fought for years and generations trying to stop youth from drinking, and a large group of them do. And we penalize them, and we penalize the people selling it to them, and they still do it. Really, you're going to do this? You're going to destroy small businesses? You're going to cause an epidemic in teen smoking again? Reverse the trends in this state and other states? Because you don't like smoking and you associate it with a minor drug called nicotine. That's what you're doing here. You are equivalently claiming that a common drug that's harmless, doesn't cause cancer, is addictive, because you don't like smoking. That's like saying you don't like alcohol because you don't like whiskey. But alcohol has its purposes too. Thank you.
Time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Groney. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. I rise today to recognize someone who has made a difference in our compensation. That one person is Senator Chambers. Senator Chambers, I want to thank you for putting in place the reimbursements that we get, because those make a difference to us who live far away as well as those who are close. So I was wondering if Senator Chambers would yield to a question.
Senator Chambers, you yield, please.
With trepidation, yes.
Senator Chambers, have I ever recognized you in this manner before?
To the point where it's embarrassing, yes, you have.
Okay. I didn't mean for it to be embarrassing, but the question I have is, when was that you worked on instating this procedure?
You said when?
When? Yes, what year was that?
It was a long time ago, but I can't give you the exact year.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody else does in this room. I wasn't quite sure where you were going when you started reading off our names, but it didn't take me long to figure it out. So, for the record, for about the fourth time, I want to make it known that I appreciate what Senator Chambers did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Quick.
No, okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do stand in opposition to Senator Wayne's amendment, and one of the things I will say is that I'd never talked to, none of the committee members ever talked to me about changing or taking out the Nebraska Clean Indoor Air Act. No one has ever really talked to me about that before when we were negotiating what we were wanted to bring out as a package. So one of the things for me is that with the Nebraska Clean Indoor Air Act, and I want to read some of these things off, why including INS products in the Clean Indoor Air Act is important. The CDC has stated that e-cigarette aerosol is not harmless water vapor and is not as safe as clean air. It contains nicotine and can contain formaldehyde and metals like nickel, lead, ultrafine particles that can damage lungs, and other cancer-causing agents like acrolein. The United States Surgeon General called on states and localities to include e-cigarettes in smoking-free policies in order to protect the public from both secondhand smoke and secondhand aerosol. Allowing e-cigarettes in workplaces and public places undermines the success of smoke-free laws by creating an environment that encourages smoking. We must address newer forms of smoking and bring in our legislation to update to address smoking in all of its forms. Nebraska is one of 3 states that does not regulate indoor vaping e-cigarette use at all, and 15 states have indoor vaping bans. So one of the things that, this was one of the other things that I would like to have seen in the bill, along with licensing and regulation, because I think what we see is if we're going to allow someone to smoke in a public place, and children see that, they think it's acceptable. They think it's acceptable for everyone to use that product, and that just promotes more use in our schools. So I really think this amendment is, and I did talk to Senator Wayne before about maybe bringing some type of legislation that would allow for, like we have cigar bars and things like that, and say, would that be acceptable? So like a vaping store could have people could vape in their stores or in a vape bar setting, and that was one of the things I did talk to him about. But as far as the Clean Indoor Act, I'm going to say that wasn't one of the concerns that I heard from people till like right before we've been bringing this legislation. So during the committee process, no one really come and addressed that to me. And so I take this amendment not lightly, because I think it just promotes our children having access to vaping products. Now, I'm going to look at it from my point of view a little bit. So if I'm sitting in a restaurant and there's someone, and they don't allow smoking in this restaurant, but they do allow vaping. Now, as a citizen, my rights are being infringed upon. I don't want to be sitting next to someone who's vaping in a restaurant. So, I guess we're going to pick a winner and loser here, I suppose. But for me, if I have my family there, I don't want them exposed to any other chemicals or nicotine product that while we're eating our lunch, or if I'm at a public event and there are people vaping around us. I don't want that to happen. I can tell you I was at a Nebraska football game and someone was vaping right next to us. Now, I don't think the University of Nebraska allowed them to have that vaping product, so we told them we would call security, so we were going to find out one way or the other, but they stopped vaping and left and went to another place in the stadium. I think as citizens, we shouldn't be subjected to that. And that's why I don't want the Clean Indoor Act removed from this language. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Quick. Senator Blood.
Thank you, Mr. President, fellow senators, friends all. I think I stand in support of Senator Wayne's amendment, but I'm going to listen to the debate and see what everybody has to say. One of the things that we need to get on record today, while we're doing all this feel-good talk about how we want to get this out of the hands of kids, is that the children that we're talking about use the internet. They have their faces in their phones, their faces in their laptops, those that are still antiquated enough to have the laptops. And they can pretty much get anything they want off the internet. I looked at some of the studies that have been done, and pretty consistently, 95% of the kids that try to get these products off the internet are successful. So I truly feel that if we aren't really smart about how we do legislation in this fashion, that's all we're going to do is just open up the floodgates for them to continue to get it, if they're not already getting it from the internet. And how do you stop that? Before we started debate on this bill, my staff and I contacted area pharmacies, and we asked, how old would you have to be to purchase nicotine gum? Because we're basically talking about nicotine, right? So 18 is the age to purchase nicotine gum at a pharmacy. So food for thought. And then Senator Brandt talked about how 20% of the young people were already vaping, was my understanding. And I started to mull that around, and I remember that not too recently that Grand Island, I think, was number 2 when it comes to binge drinking as well. I think sometimes when we look at statistics, you have to look at the area of the state. And I grew up in what we always called the tri-state area. It's Kearney and Hastings and Grand Island, right? Tri-City. There we go. I think I'm mixing it up with Minnesota. So one of the things that we have to understand in those areas is that they're still pretty rural, and there's really not a lot of things for kids to do. And for many, many decades, kids have been participating in things that they shouldn't be participating in, be it premarital sex, be it alcohol, be it smoking, be it drugs. And we hate to talk about any place in Nebraska having those issues, but Grand Island has those issues. And so in order to stop these issues, do we need new legislation, or do we need to find more things for those kids to do so they're not partaking in things that are not good for them? And I'm not sure what that answer is, but I do know that the internet's not going away. The vast majority of these kids aren't walking into stores and buying these products. And those kids that are given, we have a lot of guilty parents who give their kids debit cards and cell phones at a very early age because they have to work and they frankly don't want to parent their kids, and they feel if they can compensate them and keep them busy, they don't have to actually parent them. And because of that, there's always going to be at least one kid in the class that has access to a debit card, if not many, many more, access to the internet that's going to be able to get these for the kids with little to no consequences. So just keep that in mind. Again, we love feel-good legislation. I support Senator Quick's mission and what he's trying to do, but I don't know if Senator Wayne's amendment is going to fix all the issues that I have with the bill as well. So with that, if I do have any time left, I would love to yield it to Senator Quick.
Thanks, Senator Blood. Senator Quick, 1 minute 15.
Thank you, Senator Blood. One of the things that I did forget to mention when I was up earlier, although I do not support 1228, I do support 901. I think raising the age will be important. No matter what we get it to, we need to get that age separation. And I agree with all the other language in the Attorney General's language in that General Affairs Committee amendment. And I support my own Bill 149. And I said a little bit about it before, but one of the things that I talked to Senator Wayne here yesterday when I seen that he had this amendment and went and talked to him and said that I know we have cigar bars and some of those facilities around. I'd be willing to take an amendment that would allow for a facility like that to have vaping in their own stores or to have a vaping bar, something like that. So I'm willing to work on something like that, but I think for the public, to address some of the issues that some of us who don't want to go be next to someone vaping, maybe that would help with that issue, to let them vape where they would like to, but allow us to be not be exposed to those vaping products. So with that, thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Quick. Senator LeGrone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of AM 1228. I think this strikes the right balance between ensuring that these products stay out of our schools and personal freedom for adults. I completely support what Senator Wayne is trying to do here. By raising it to 19, we ensure that these products are not going to be easily available to those individuals who are still underage and in high school. And then on top of that, we also ensure that an adult has the freedom to choose to use these products, if they so choose, where they so choose. So I rise in strong support of this amendment because I think it strikes the right balance between those two goals. I'd yield the rest of my time to Senator Wayne.
Thanks, Senator LeGrone. Senator Wayne, 4 minutes 15.
Thank you. I won't be able to use all the 4 minutes. Colleagues, and I think you can ask Senator Lowe, he was in the room when we had this conversation. We had an agreement. I keep going back to that. And now the target has moved to where yesterday I was approached and it was an exemption like a cigar bar exemption. Had that conversation occurred 2 months ago or a month ago, we could have probably gotten to an agreement. But where we're at in this session and the things coming up, and quite honestly, the bills that I have coming up, I just don't have time to sit down and bring the industry together and figure that out. That's why we had an agreement. There was an agreement. My amendment reflects that agreement. And that's what I'm trying to promote here. I'm trying to have this body hold us accountable to the agreement. I will tell you that if the bill fails or my amendment fails, I myself or somebody else, I'm hoping me, if I will, I'll file a motion to recommit. And we'll go back to the committee and we'll go back to since none of us had an agreement, and we'll have to get it back out of committee. But we can't have agreements in the committee and have it change on the floor. Now, I understand if the body would have voted for 21, that is the will of the body and we keep moving forward. That is a fundamental difference than the bill introducer changing the agreement after it comes out of the committee. That to me is a fundamental difference. When you amend something on the floor and the body changes it over your objection, even though that didn't happen, then that's the will of the body and things happen on the floor. That's why they're called them floor amendments and why they're called amendments. But if we have an agreement, I believe we should uphold the agreement between the two individuals. And if you change your agreement, at least have the dignity to come talk about it. But don't ask me to negotiate against myself after we've already had an agreement. I'm not doing that. The attorney in me won't allow me to do that even if I wanted to. That's just negotiation 101. You don't negotiate against yourself. So what my bill simply does, keeps it at 19 to solve the issue that Senator Quick is trying to address. It keeps the licensing requirement in. I think that's a huge gap in where we're at that we have to fill. We have to have a licensing requirement. It removes the Clean Indoor Air Act because the difference between everything else, there is no empirical data. What Senator Quick said on the mic was it's not as clean as air. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this body, this air we breathe in, this body is not as clean as most air. We don't have to walk any farther than outside the window sills and see there's asbestos and everything else on the windows. So anytime somebody touches that window, somewhere it's floating in this air. The fact that we have construction going on, this is not as clean as air as outside most of the time. The other thing of it is, you walk into a bar, you walk into a family establishment and somebody's not vaping, but let's say they're watching Sons of Anarchy, which is on regular TV. There's more studies showing that exposing kids to violence than this. We're not regulating that. There's no data here to support what's going on.
1 minute.
If there was data here saying that secondhand smoke or secondhand vape causes X, Y, and Z, not one study here or one, I'm talking about real data. A lot of data that shows it. I'll be the first one to stand up. We gotta do something about it. But the data is not here. It's just not there. There's trace amounts. Well, is it harmful? We don't know that. Is it close to being harmful? We don't know that. Can you even inhale it if you sit next to somebody? We don't know that. We know that there are a few products in this line that have trace amounts. But majority of the good brands filter all that out. There isn't. It's water and nicotine. And sometimes they add a flavor to make it more palatable. But as far as the trace amounts, nobody can tell me anything about it. And I'm not comfortable making a policy decision without data to back it up when you're talking about removing an entire industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. Senator Quick announces some guests visiting today. We have with us 16 fourth graders from the Trinity Lutheran Elementary School in Grand Island, Nebraska. With the Trinity Lutheran fourth graders, please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Senator Brandt has some guests. We have 10 fourth graders from the Deschler Elementary School in Deschler, Nebraska, up in the North Balcony as well. With the Deschler fourth graders, please rise. We can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. And Senator Vargas has a very special guest. We have with us Aya Youssef, who is the UNO Student Body President and a Student Regent. Aya is with us on the North Balcony. Aya, please rise so we can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing discussion, Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. As usual, you save the best for last. No, we're glad that everybody's here. I'm not going to speak about the bill at all. I'm going to try, based on my advanced years, to persuade you all of something. This bill should move. I hope that there will be a vote taken on it. I'm not of a frame of mind to say that if it's not what I want, then the bill shouldn't go at all. The Bible, for those who are scriptural, says, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established. Well, it didn't say who the witnesses are. I have my 3 witnesses. Percy Sledge sang a song, When a Man Loves a Woman. Most people are familiar with the part. Well, anyway, I won't go into because I might break into song. But one of the lyrics says, if I can't see you when I want to, I'll see you when I can. It means you take what you can get. The Rolling Stones said, you can't always get what you want, so you try to want what you get. There's a kind of country western group, and they say, if you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. This that we have before us now, whether it's all that we want, whether it's what we love, it's all we're going to get. And if we don't get to a vote, then we're not going to have anything, and that's when I will be skeptical or suspicious with reference to people's motivation. That's all I will say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Pansy Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I stand with great concern about Amendment 1228. I don't know why, if people are so anxious to allow this to occur, why don't we make an exception for vape shops and vape bars, just like we did for cigar bars? The Judiciary Committee last week went to a cigar bar here in Lincoln for a time to just get together after a very long and contentious session so far with hearings. And we really had a great time. I'd never been to a cigar bar before, and you know, it was really interesting to me to get to do that. But again, I'm sitting here hearing this information, and I don't want to go to my favorite restaurants and be engulfed in vast amounts of smoke because people want to have that ability to do it wherever they want. Let's go forward and change the statute to mirror what is allowed with cigar bars, and allow people that want to do it to go ahead and do it. But I don't really get why we need to make this open to everybody whenever they want. Literally, if you have not, we just talked to one senator who had not seen anybody exhale vape. And when you see it, it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland, the way that it's a huge amount of smoke. My dad died from smoking when I was 14. So I have been quite firm and certain about where I stand on smoking. And I understand that this isn't a tobacco delivery system, at least yet. And I have real concerns. The CDC says that nicotine poses dangers to pregnant women and fetuses, children, and adolescents. Use of nicotine in any form, including the electronic nicotine devices, is unsafe. They say that it's highly addictive. Nicotine is toxic to developing fetuses and impairs fetal brain and lung development. Poisonings have resulted among users and non-users. People can argue with me, but that's what's on the website for the Center for Disease Control. So we're in a situation where Senator Wayne is correct. We don't have all of the policy. We don't know what all of the studies are finding. But to just say, okay, then fine, we're going to make it so that anybody can smoke anywhere or vape anywhere, to me is unreasonable. I go to a number of small restaurants. You take 5 people vaping, that restaurant, I would not go back. And yes, I know people are going to say, well, the restaurant can make that determination. But I want to be able to go where I want to go get food with friends and do what I want. And I don't want to have to battle all of the smoke, all of the vape, and have those smells, and they do smell, and if there are toxins, which the Center for Disease Control says that there are toxins, I don't want to fight that. It says that the Center for Disease Control says it contains nicotine and can contain formaldehyde and metals like nickel and lead, ultrafine particles that can damage lungs, and other cancer-causing agents like acrolein. And I have all these statistics. So again, I went through a long period where my parents were both trying to quit smoking, and I watched my mom, when she finally was quitting smoking, a long time after my dad died, she would sit in the smoking section. Remember, we used to have smoking sections of airplanes and of restaurants, because she still loved the smell and loved what she got from that odor. Again, I don't want to smell it. I don't want to deal with it. If Senator Wayne is adamant about this, then let's just mirror this to the cigar bars and the vaping bars and move forward. And I support LB 149 and Amendment 901. Thank you very much, Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Senator Pansy Brooks. Senator Arch.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a couple of questions for Senator Wayne.
Senator Wayne, would you yield, please?
May have missed some of this in your presentation, Senator Wayne, so I'm just going to ask for clarification. If it is not part of the Indoor Clean Act, I'm assuming that any owner may continue to ban it from their premises if they choose to do so.
Correct.
Correct. So that, I mean, I've been to many restaurants and it just says no vaping on the front door.
Correct.
And that's the choice of the owner to ban that.
Correct.
Okay. I may have missed this as well, but you, in your amendment, you have eliminated 19 and you've referred to minor, age of majority, legal age to purchase, that type of thing. Can you help me understand?
That might have been a bill drafting error in one of the areas. I want it to be 19. Let me be clear. I want it to be 19, and I want it to be removing from the Clean Indoor Air Act. That's all I wanted to do. So I did see that too.
So do you have any concerns with that? I mean, it appears as though that age of...
Oh, that's right. Because the issue is, yes, I remember, thank you. The issue is, I also had fears of today, if you pass a bill and pass a law, then you have 18-year-olds today who are smoking who instantly become criminals. And so this is a way to grandfather in those individuals who are 18 today. It will take effect next year, so next year they would still, it wouldn't go on forever, but you'll grandfather the current 18-year-olds in. Because we're going to create a whole class of criminals overnight, and they would have no notice of anything except for the law changed, that who's going to tell them that the law changed.
Okay, so then the use of minor, if the state changes that definition at any point, age of majority, minor, it would alter this as well, correct?
No, so on page 3, it says minor and what the definition is, but that's the definition for this act, for this area of the law. So that's the issue. It wouldn't change. It wouldn't change anywhere else. We do that all the time, and as far as ages and what definitions mean for that particular act.
So minor is defined as any person under 19 years of age.
Yes, except any person who has at least 18 years age, January 1st, 2020, shall not be considered a minor. That's that gap period.
That's that 1 year period.
Yeah, that grandfather clause.
Okay, thank you. My last question has to do with schools. Are schools part of the Clean Indoor Act?
I don't believe so. But schools can ban it from indoors themselves too. That's just the school board policy. And in fact, OPS, when I was on the board, we had a no vaping on grounds or around schools as part of our policy.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Senator Arch and Senator Wayne. Senator Lowe.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. You know, personal choice. I think that's what we need to be thinking about here. It's been brought up that people would not want to be in a restaurant where there was smoke or vaping, and I agree with that. I probably wouldn't want to be there either, and there are choices where I can go. As a businessman, I ran restaurants and bars for 20 years. And there was smoke in all those bars, even though I did take the cigarette machine out of one of my bars because I didn't agree with selling it. And so I thought it would lessen the smoke in the bar. It did not. People bought them before they came in. It's personal choice. So one of my last establishments I was building it, and I made it a smoke-free establishment. At that time, you could still smoke in public buildings and smoke in places of business. You could smoke in your homes or apartments. I wanted people to have an option to go someplace where they could wear their nice clothes in, and at the end of the day, they could walk out smelling very decent and not have to hang your clothes in the garage when you got home that night. Personal choice. As we were discussing this bill, I went online to see what I could do online. And today, I think the stars crossed and Senator Blood and I agree on quite a few things on this bill. And I appreciate her standing up and speaking. But I went online and I could buy the parts for vaping products. All I had to do was agree that I wasn't 21. I got all the way down to where I would have to enter it on my debit card or credit card, and that it would be shipped to me. So let us not be fooled that this bill, even if it was 21, would have stopped vaping products in our children's hands. Many of these young people don't buy from stores. They use the internet. We could ban them from our stores, from buying in our stores, but they will find ways to get these products. We did it when we were young. If something wasn't right and our parents said, don't do it, many of us went out and found a way to get it done. So let's not be fooled that by passing a bill, we will stop it all. We don't allow marijuana smoking. We don't allow smoking cigarettes in public places. It still gets done. Several times I've been on an airplane and I've smelled smoke, cigarette smoke. It has been banned now for years. Let's not be fooled. Let's have the administration of the schools grow a backbone and take these products away when they're found. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Lowe. Senator Moorfeld.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm glad that Senator Lowe brought up personal choice because I love to talk about personal choice. Abortion, marijuana, healthcare, talk about nicotine. We agree on motorcycle helmets, actually. That being said, colleagues, I just have to point out the irony of listening to all this and listening to some people stand up in support of even nicotine and people's personal choice to use nicotine, which killed my grandmother when I was 11 years old to lung cancer, which is clearly dangerous. And yet we don't even allow people to use medical marijuana to be able to solve health issues that have been proven to be solved by medical marijuana. So I hope that we have a long discussion about personal choice and principled positions that aren't hypocritical when we come to Senator Wishart's bill, LB 110, on medical marijuana. And if Senator Wishart's bill fails on the floor, then I'm happy to have that discussion at the ballot box, and I'll bet the farm or the house that will win. So I just wanted to get up and make that point this morning. The irony of some of the arguments that I'm hearing on the floor. I'll be honest with you, I have gone back and forth on this bill about probably 10 or 15 times in my head. I don't even know how I'm going to vote yet necessarily because I'm very conflicted on this bill for a lot of the reasons that Senator Patty Pansy Brooks brought up, for some of the reasons that Senator Wayne has brought up, and many of the reasons that Senator Quick has brought up. So this has been a really tough bill for me. And you know, most importantly, I owe an apology to my dear friend and colleague, Senator Andrew Legrone. I promised him on Saturday at my cousin's wedding that I would admit defeat to the Soldier Boy dance-off that he very clearly won at my cousin's wedding. So congratulations, Senator Legrone. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Moorfield. Senator Quick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. And I'm not going to speak long. I would just, I guess I would ask if Senator Wayne would yield to a question.
Senator Wayne, would you yield, please?
Yes.
My question is if we were to work on something between general and select that would address maybe some of my concerns and yours, like allowing them to have them like to be able to vape in vape shops, or like they do for cigar bars and those type of settings, would that be something that we could work on?
Yes, but there's two issues, Senator Quick. We had an agreement, and if we bring bills to the floor and we negotiate on the floor to change those agreements, then how do we keep doing that? And how do I know the agreement that we negotiate the next time is still going to be valid? And two, if you show me the data to support that vapes will somehow harm the person next to them, I will be all supportive. That's my answer.
All right. Thank you, Senator Wayne. So, you know, my big issue, I would just like it to come to a vote. I think this is too important of a bill to let not pass this year. I'm willing to work on language to try to address some of his concerns. I also want to, I would also like, I think my concerns are valid too, so I think we need to address that as well. So if we can come to some type of an agreement, I'm willing to let's just vote on the bills and see where it all falls, and then we can work on it between general and select file to see if we can amend some of these issues. So I still probably won't, I will say, I probably still won't support 1228 because I'm not saying going back on my word, but I do want to work to try to address his issues. I just don't think that taking out the Clean Indoor Act is the right way to do it. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Quick. Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning again, colleagues. I wanted to rise to clarify a few things. You know, we heard a couple things. Early on, we heard it doesn't make sense, you couldn't vape in a vape shop. But as some of the folks pointed out, you know, there are exceptions to the Clean Indoor Air Act, and I think it was just discussed here that might be looked at. But it seems to me that's a little bit problematic. We don't have a bill introduced towards that end this year, and I'm not sure that you could get that, question whether you can get that done this year in this legislation. And it was also mentioned that there's really no evidence as to the harm of secondhand vapors, so to speak. And I didn't research the issue, but all I know is what I heard in committee at the hearing, and several testifiers would dispute that conclusion. In the transcript, page 33, we had a testifier talking about, you know, a variety of particles and chemicals from secondhand vapors. Page 45, another testifier listed numerous potential harmful chemicals and products. Page 47, somebody directed us to the FDA website that suggests, you know, that even e-cigarettes can contain toxic chemicals. Page 81, there's reference to the Surgeon General's position on this. So there at least were some representations at the hearing that these items are harmful. And with that said, I'm a little bit reluctant to dismiss this testimony and suggest that no, this shouldn't be included in the Clean Indoor Air Act. But I'm going to listen to the testimony, and I'd be interested to hear what type of a compromise can be worked out on this, and we'll probably discuss this another day. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Breezy. Senator Wayne, you recognize to close on your amendment.
Colleagues, thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, every piece of data we heard here today was about the user. Let me make sure I make that clear. Every piece of data we heard today was about the user. Now, I could only imagine, I wasn't in the body and Senator Chambers was, and I wish I had thought about this earlier and asked him a question, but when they were talking about tobacco products being smoked, I bet you there were more paper being sent around this body on study after study on the harmful effects of the person sitting next to the user. Secondhand smoke, secondhand smoke. How many times did I hear that growing up? Secondhand smoke, because there was data after data points behind it. What we heard today was, yes, there are trace amounts for the end user, the user. And here we are going to take what I would consider government overreach to say, hey, no, we know what's best for everybody. Although we don't have data to prove this, we know what's best for everybody. I don't think we do that as a body. I don't think we typically and continue just to say, I don't like this, so let's regulate it completely out of the family restaurant. If there's a small restaurant that you have concerns about vaping in, or a local bar, you can have that conversation. And if it's a big enough economic impact, or they like you enough, they might say no vaping. Because there are shops right now in my district that say no vaping. No smoking, no vaping. And that smoking means on the patio. Because see, if you're outside in the patio, you can, and it's an enclosed area, you can still smoke. But no, none of that. We don't want any of that on our premise. All I'm asking for is the data to support indoor. It's not there. Furthermore, I believe in upholding the agreements we make. If you recall, I got on the floor and said that I'm going to bring back LB 85 to uphold the agreement that the mayor of City of Omaha and the speaker negotiated. We didn't have to do that. You recall that Senator Groney and I spent 2 days going back and forth because of an agreement that we felt was broke. At some point, I'm going to continue to stand up and say if we have an agreement, we should honor those agreements. I'm willing to work next year when I get people together, and that is a great song, Celebration. I was going to start dancing, but that would be a little awkward. But my point at all, let's honor the agreement, but more importantly, let's make sure that we're not overstepping before the data is there. I'm willing to work on things next year, but many of you know my plate is completely full, and I got a bill coming up here today. It's going to be a heavy lift after Senator Dorn's heavy lift, and I'm going to continue to work on those things. Had this been 2 months ago, everybody in this body knows that I would sit down and continue to work with anything. But now we got the budget coming up. Hopefully we got some tax things coming up, and I still have 4 other bills that I'm trying to get through the finish line. I just don't have time to meet with all the industry people. If somebody else wants to step up, great. But my problem is the one championing this, I can't sit in the room by myself anymore and negotiate with. Understand what I'm saying? That's hard for me to do. And since I can't do that right now, I can't put the time in right now. So I'm asking this body to uphold the agreement. And next year, if we want to create an exemption, we can do an interim study on it. I'm sure Chairman Breezy will allow that. We figure out the industry and figure out how to craft it and make sure it's done right. With that, I'll ask for your green support on 1228 and the underlining bill. And I'd ask for a call of the House.
On a request, place House on a call. The question is, shall the House go on a call? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
23 ayes, 5 nays to place the House under call.
House on a call. All members, please return to your desks and check in. The House is under call. A roll call vote in reverse order has been requested. All members, please return to your desk and check in. The House is under call. Senator Hughes, check in, please. Senator Bowles, check in, please. Senator Wayne, we're lacking Senator Lathrop and Senator Salama. We can wait or continue or proceed. We will proceed. The question before the body is the adoption of Senator Wayne's AM 1228. It's been a request for a roll call vote in reverse order. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Wishart, voting yes. Senator Williams, voting no. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Walls, voting no. Senator Vargas, voting no. Senator Stinner, voting no. Senator Slama, voting yes. Senator Shear, voting yes. Senator Quick, voting no. Senator Pansy Brooks, voting no. Senator Merman, voting no. Senator Moser, voting no. Senator Moorfeld, not voting. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator McAllister, voting no. Senator Lowe, voting yes. Senator Linehan, not voting. Senator Lindstrom, voting no. Senator Lathrop, Senator LaGrone, voting yes. Senator Coulterman, voting yes. Senator Kalowski, not voting. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Howard, voting no. Senator Hickelman, voting yes. Senator Hilgers, voting yes. Senator Matt Hansen, voting no. Senator Ben Hansen, voting yes. Senator Holleran, voting yes. Senator Groney, voting yes. Senator Gregert, voting no. Senator Geist, voting yes. Senator Friesen, voting no. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator Crawford, voting no. Senator Clements, voting yes. Senator Chambers, not voting. Senator Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator Breesy, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting no. Senator Bostelman, voting yes. Senator Bowles, not voting. Senator Blood, not voting. Senator Arch, voting yes. Senator Albright, voting no. 21 ayes. 21 ayes, Mr. President, on the amendment.
The amendment is not adopted. I raise the call. Items to the record, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. New resolution by the Retirement Committee. That'll be laid over. Mr. President, Senator McDonald will move to recess the body until 1:30 p.m.
Members heard the motion to recess. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. We are in recess.